Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about a really important topic and a really difficult one. It's about grief. Grief can be really shocking when you get divorced. Like, if you perhaps were the one who, quote, wanted it, I hear all the time from my clients and people in my groups, like, I wanted this. Why am I so sad? Right? First of all, no one ever wants it. No one wants to divorce, right? We had a future that we imagined, that we dreamed of, and now we are being cut off from that, whether we have made the decision ourselves or it was made for us. We never imagined this, and here we are. Right? So my guest today is Barri Leiner Grant, and she is a grief specialist and an educator who joins me to help us understand how to process the grief that we feel when our marriages end. Barri divorced after a 17-year marriage, and she helps name grief and grieving for others who have experienced losing this imagined future. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Barri Leiner Grant. Barri, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this really important topic, grief.
I mean, I think it's a topic that we don't talk about nearly enough, especially in non-death loss.
Yes, yes. You know, one of the things that I always hear from my clients, my followers, my Facebook group, whatever, is like, quote, I wanted this, which of course they didn't, right? Why am I so, like, the grief is shocking to women in divorce, right? Like, it's the thing that we avoid, right? Because as you said, we don't talk about it enough. And it like hits them so suddenly and in the most shocking ways. Why do you feel like that is?
I think we equate grief and grieving with death loss. And truly, what grief is anything in which you imagined the movie of your life ending in a way that you had not planned for, surprise ending.
Yeah.
That there is a loss of something, any loss, right? This could be anything that you imagined was going to turn out one way and has not. And this significant loss, even though the person that you are separating from, divorcing, is not in fact dead, in some ways it's almost easier because you don't have to continue to communicate with them, continue a relationship. So it's so confusing because part of your future has died, and yet some of it is still there in front of you. And so that's almost like having the anticipatory grief of someone with dementia, let's say. Like, the person is there right in front of you, and yet you have also lost them.
Yeah. And you've lost the dream of what you thought your life was supposed to be.
Whatever future you planned for yourself, that may be growing old together. That may mean those beautiful, twilight years. That may mean empty nesting together. Whatever that is, no longer working, traveling the world. Maybe you made all these beautiful plans for when, and your for when has been shifted, changed, altered. The end of the movie is no longer what you thought it was going to be.
Right. So how did you get into this? Just give us a little bit of your story. I mean, you've been through divorce, right? Like this is you're on this podcast because you've actually gone through this, right?
I have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the first big loss that I experienced that was transformational was the loss of my mother, Ellen, in 1993. She died quite suddenly.
Mm.
She was also one of the first people that I knew in our orbit to ever have a divorce. I was in fourth grade and we were very, very first on the block, if you will, to have a family who had experienced divorce.
Mm-hmm.
I then, of course, was trying to set myself up for a marriage that would not end in divorce the way my mom's had. But also, we don't know that ever to be true in any relationship we try.
Mm-hmm.
I also
Mm-hmm.
admired what I learned from her about the way that she and my father, way back when in the 70s, crafted a really intentional way of separating and
Wow.
in remaining friends. I always say my parents invented conscious uncoupling.
Wow. Mine were like War of the Roses. Good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you.
But I don't think it was until I lost my mother that I realized that a lot of the loss that I had experienced as a child of divorced parents, and then in my own divorce, how I would guide my own children through divorce was indeed grief. I
Yeah,
don't think we named it that.
that's right.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I realized that there were so many non-death losses over the course of my life that I had experienced. And through my work with other women as a peer guided mother loss support,
Mm-hmm.
I just knew in every experience that I had gone through that was shadowed in shame and not a topic that people felt comfortable discussing, that every time I opened up the door and started to have a conversation about any of the experiences that I had that felt curious, the light would shine right in, the door would swing wide open. And when I shared my vulnerability, when I shared my story, I believe we all need to be seen, heard, and witnessed in whatever loss we've experienced. Your loss matters. And
Yeah.
I felt like when I got divorced, I lived away from home, also the home that I knew, without
Mm-hmm.
a mother. And so the people
Mm-hmm.
that I needed to depend on for my day-to-day life, living with my children on my own in a place away from the support I knew, was a whole new world of
Mm-hmm.
grieving. I
Yeah.
had to find a support system to craft a better way of mothering myself, sistering myself
Mm-hmm.
in order to show up for my children.
So were you already doing grief work when you got divorced, or did
As
it?
a peer guide, I
Yeah,
moved into my training and went all full in after, because I realized that these sort of non-death losses needed a better place to live in modern day society.
absolutely. Ugh, so true. You mentioned shame, which I think is,
Hmm.
I don't know if this is true, but I'm making it up, that shame is a very complicating factor in grief,
Absolutely.
especially in divorce, right? The amount of stigma and shame that we carry through, when we get divorced for a variety of reasons, right? For me, it feels like it compounds the grief in many ways, or it confuses it, or tell me your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I always say it's under the hood of fear. The shame lives under there. We look at our own success, if you will. We think that this is going to end in a way that is forever. And if life teaches us nothing more than knowing we have very little control over how much happens in our lives, we do have control over how we meet grief, if you
Mm-hmm.
will.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And in doing so, I think part of the shame is that we feel failure and we feel that society does not support us in just something that changed about our relationship. And so because we know, the societal norms, if you will, for marriage, I feel are the same unconditional ways in which we feel we're supported in grief. I think that all of these things create otherness, right? We feel like we have done something wrong, done something bad, done something, and really we're making the best choice that we can for ourselves and our families. If we can look at it like that and have conversations like that, I think we would alleviate shame. But what we always say is name it to tame it, right? If we're not calling it what it is, I am ashamed that my marriage didn't work out. I am also really happy and hopeful that I can have a new future that I imagine for myself.
Yeah.
Shame is a very complicated part of any journey, anything that we made the movie, we wrote the movie, we're in the movie, and all of a sudden it's not ending the way that we imagined.
Right.
And how does that make us feel? We're often looking at how society makes us feel from the outside in. But if we were to look at the inside out, that's where how can we alleviate the shame?
Right.
What can we release from feeling like society is looking at us from the outside in as if we have failed at something?
Yeah. And what's so, I find it so fascinating that the divorce rate's pretty up there given, right? And yet we all feel this shame. It's like, well, half of us are going through this. And I would hazard to guess that the half that aren't going through it are also not happy, right? There's and so why are we carrying this shame? What is it that we are? And I think it's, Pia Mellody talks about carried shame. And I think it's a really interesting concept, right? That often, I know in my marriage, right? I was not the one who should feel shame for this marriage not working out because I was actually the one working on it. My husband was the one cheating on me and fronting that he was doing the work on the marriage while also sleeping with God knows how many other women. Right. And so if I feel a shame, it's sort of like I'm carrying the shame that actually was his to be feeling. And so if I'm carrying that shame and then it doesn't work or whatever it is, right? The relationship doesn't work. I'm also, if I'm carrying the shame of the relationship, I'm also carrying the expectation that I can fix it. That I'm that I'm somehow in control and in charge of that.
Yes. I think it's because we feel fundamentally flawed.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're made to feel that way.
Right.
I think, embarrassment, humiliation, that's not something that we come out and share. It's something that that's what I was saying, that we feel internally. And it's like this, a self-awareness also, as I said, where we're not naming what we feel because it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And we don't even feel like we necessarily have anything to heal or to, that might not be, as you said, part of our recovering, but we need to sort of, to me, break the cycle by talking about divorce.
Right. Exactly. Let's talk right. Exactly. That the only way that we uncover the shame and we sort of release us all from it is by just talking about it, which is what we're all doing. Right. Which is,
right. Yeah. Acknowledge that there have been mistakes, wrongdoings, maybe apologize, make amends. We do this in so many other ways in our lives. And yet in divorce, because children are sometimes involved, because money is always and usually involved. Like there's
Right.
so many other things that we may have attached. But I think when we begin to bring these difficult conversations out of the shadow and into the daily vernacular, we then realize, I'd have women, I'm sure you have too, over and over, who kind of in secret were like, hey, come on over. I see you on the other side of this. And I see hope. I always say I'm a hope dealer.
I love it.
I see hope. And they're asking in secret. But when we get together in groups or honest conversation, we can tell somebody what we're feeling bad about, or that we've had pain around the shame, and we can learn to practice self-forgiveness, be open about our feelings, practice self-compassion, think about our self-talk. How are we talking to ourselves about this? Like you said, that wasn't even mine to carry.
Not right.
He cheated.
Exactly. Right.
But somehow society has made us feel shame because we are part of the X% of people for whom a marriage failed.
We failed. Right. We failed. Right. And then there's the shame of like, well, he cheated on me. So what was wrong with me that I wasn't enough? Right. And, I tried to lose the weight. I tried to all of the gross things.
Exactly. And what we get into like the nitty gritty of like, what experience from childhood makes that feel so awful? Like what else is that tapping that may not even be the divorce? And that sometimes is like where our work is, right?
That is so where our work is. I want to talk about that on the other side. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right. Let's talk about that
the root cause of the experiences.
The root cause of the shame. And like,
I'm not a shame expert. I'm really not a shame expert, but I really feel even in grief and loss, when you look under the hood and think about it and how much shame I carried, like from my own parents' divorce, right? The day they told me, I'll never forget, I was doing my spelling words. It was a Thursday. I was doing my spelling words. I also felt like I had to always continue to get 100 in order to make everybody happy, to keep them happy. So we also have a lot of shame around things that came very early in our childhood. It could be unworthiness, feelings of unworthiness, trauma, abuse, emotional abuse. Like there's so much in our childhood that will trigger that shame button. And that is all under the hood, as I say. But again, not a therapist, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, listen, same. I know, but I think it's a really important part of the conversation because I do think that it really does kind of fuel the grief or compound the grief when we feel shame.
Stops us from having the kind of healing conversations that we need to have and to heal and rebuild our self-esteem. That's knocked sideways, even if it is your choice. You're out there again, trying to have a new rest of your life.
That's right. So, okay. So how do we grieve a divorce? Like, how does that work? Is there a process? Is there 5 steps to grieving your divorce? Like, lay it on us, Barri. Right.
I wish. What I will say is that I think you need to consciously lean in and make what I call time on your calendar for grief tending. Maybe you are really sad that this happened and you need to do some introspection. So and you need to move grief through you in any way that you can. We're looking for movement forward. And what I mean by that is tears are movement, physical activity is movement, writing and journaling is movement, talking to a therapist is movement. Any activity in which you can feel movement forward. I always say tears are movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so this is what you call grief tending. Yes,
Grief, grief
like
tending and grief,
oh, and
grief
it's so
tending tools. Grief tending tools are just how do I weed and water the experience so that I have control over it and I don't have to come out of the weeds
yes.
without a plan.
So, I mean, it's really interesting, right? Because I always say that, like, in my divorce, like, I was sort of, grief is not the kind of thing we want to tend. Grief is the kind of thing that sort of societally, culturally, all of the things, just like naturally, we try to avoid, right? We're like, I don't want to feel that, right? And of course, the only way to the other side is through it.
Yeah.
But like the idea of like scheduling grieving on your calendar just sounds like the most counterintuitive like thing in the world. And
it'll come find you.
That's exactly
it'll come find you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I talk about after my divorce, it was, 10 years of grief avoidance, right? But in that 10 years of grief avoidance, my alcohol consumption continued to grow and grow and grow. Just like behaviors where I was not living a sort of really, fulfilled or happy life, right? But because it was. And then what happened was, I quit drinking and all of the grief was still there. It was just waiting. It was just waiting. It wasn't like it had dissipated 1 ounce. It was just waiting.
Right. So if we don't look at it head on, like I said, it will grow like a weed around us. And we're going to have to get out there, when we wake up and look at it head on. We don't often choose, we don't sign up for this, to happen to us, but we can choose how we deal with it.
Yeah.
So you chose in the early days to numb and avoid, and we do that. We're really good at using that as a coping skill. Sometimes we are in trauma and we may have a lot of avoidance.
There was a lot of trauma I wasn't facing or dealing with for sure.
Right. And it's hard to name. That's another thing that's hard to name until I need to take care of myself. And I'm realizing that this isn't going away. And then you find the right kind of support for that. So I say grief tending because I think meeting it head on, like really looking at it, can help you confront it, befriend it, consciously become aware of ways in which if we do this, we can heal. So there aren't it's not a neat package. Gosh, I wish it were. I also think we don't realize that when we stuff it down, that it will show up in our body and come out sideways. So whether that's in dis-ease, illness, you hear so much when we don't speak our truth. For example, my truth, I had nodes on my voice box and had to have them surgically removed. And I thought, well, if that isn't waving a flag for needing to speak my truth and having not spoken my truth. Sometimes we're trying to protect children. Sometimes we're trying to protect ourselves from that shame. There's all different things that we do to quell and calm and nourish. For some people, they move to food. And what we realize is the more that we avoid, the more that it even comes back, in my opinion, in a bigger tidal wave than the one that we needed to confront.
Yes, 100%. 100%. So grief tending can look like a number of things, right? You said like journaling or meditating or just like setting time to cry. Like, what are some other?
Yeah. I mean, I always say, sometimes, getting in the car from here to there and just like making yourself like your grief tending playlist, like put on the sad songs or put on the songs that may allow you to release your anger. I love that. Having a playlist.
Yes.
Listening to a podcast in the car can be grief tending. Any way, to me, in which you are confronting your grief, looking it straight on and saying, I need to deal with this. Looking at emotions, right? Like, what am I feeling today? I love a journal for that. I feel like you can lay down what you're feeling on the inside and look at it outside of yourself and notice that it is, maybe it's not you, maybe it is a part of you that you can find self-compassion for. I like the idea of creating a compassionate meditation where you just, maybe it's even guided, where you have something on that just reminds you, you know, you are okay, you are loved, you are on purpose, you are dynamic, you are, maybe there are affirmations. You know, you have to, there's no one way or right way. And that's the good news and the bad news about grief and grieving. So it's daunting because we don't have those, you know, 5 steps. And also it is kind of a creative endeavor in figuring out what feels good. So you try these things on and you say, what does journaling feel like? How do I feel before I start writing? And how do I feel after? What we know scientifically about writing, which I think is really interesting, is that when we write by hand, the prefrontal cortex responds in healing. So just knowing that this, setting a timer, let's say, and writing for 5 minutes in a journal, uninterrupted, automatic writing, just move that hand across the page, can help you help the body respond in healing, letting the autonomic nervous system know, I am okay. I am no longer in fight or flight. I don't need to be in protection mode. I can put it outside of myself. I also think when it's on the page and you see it, you're like, look at all that muck that was on the inside. So I also think in so many ways, having a practice, you know, waking up and journaling and letting it go. Sometimes it sounds like a whole lot of complaining, a whole lot of fear, a whole lot of junk. I think to myself, I was going to take that all with me. I was going to start my day with that. I'm up to here with all of that. And so if I clear it and start from zero, or at least close to zero, I can in some way show myself that, you know, call it the Windex of the day. I can show myself that I've done like a little bit of internal cleaning, cleansing, and I can start from a little bit of a cleaner way.
And I think that's so important. Yes. And I think it's really important, especially as mothers, that we do that, right? Because, man, the amount of stress that we go through a divorce, and then, you know, we're grieving, we're angry, we have all, like you said, like all of this emotional muck in us. And like we hit the ground running with our kids. And like, yeah, we have shorter tempers. We might, you know, just parent in ways that we're like not necessarily that proud of. And by the way, that's totally fucking normal and okay. But also, right, there are ways, like if we can do that, I love that it's a Windex, right? If you can wake up 5 minutes earlier or take 5 minutes, like whatever it is, to just, you know, in the bathroom, to just get that shit out.
There's a beautiful book. It's been around for ages. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And I think part of getting a divorce is also finding, who am I on the other side? You've lost a sense of yourself in the world, a sense of who you are now. Versus what you were before. Maybe because you're no longer a wife, you have big feelings about that. Maybe you don't know who you are in the workforce anymore. And so I think meeting yourself in a new introspective, creative way can also be kind of interesting. I always recommend The Artist's Way to people.
Me too.
Who are, so as a practitioner, one of the things that Julia Cameron asks is that we do something called morning pages each day. And I always say she calls them morning pages to do upon waking. I say morning pages upon waking, but MOURNING. We are mourning what we thought was our future. And so I think waking up and doing morning pages can not only unleash the grief, the anger, the confusion, but it can also elicit something creative in us, some kind of spark that can emerge. So once the bitch fest is done, or all the complaining, or all the muck and all of that, there will be some little glimmer that comes through in your writing that's like, oh man, I do want to be a singer. I do want to date again. I do want to try that thing that he never wanted to do. Sometimes that the grief tending is just that, finding my creativity and doing the thing that he never wanted to do can be so stinking empowering.
Yes. And also like claiming who you are, right? I know that there were a lot of things that and this is very true, I think, in emotionally abusive relationships, which a lot of my listeners are in, and I was in, right? That there are ways that they tell you that you are, that you start to believe, that are so not who you are, right? And so, but you've believed it for so long that process of writing and, like, as you said, just like finding who you actually are and like owning the truth of who you actually are.
It's a great prompt. Who am I? Who am I now? Who am I today? Who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And prompts are everywhere. Some people look at the white page and it's so daunting and it feels like I have to do something right. It feels like I have to be grammatically correct. Nobody's ever reading your journal. Nobody is ever reading your journal. Put it somewhere really good. A lock on a top drawer, hidden under a pile of books. I think that's what it is, that we feel as if we will be judged. This is such a beautiful, private, judgment-free place. I say, even name your inner critic. Julia Cameron calls hers Nigel, which cracks me up. She's like, oh, Nigel. So also the way that you're talking to yourself, and like you said, you've believed these messages from before. Maybe you're even telling yourself you're unworthy, you are ashamed, you are bad, start talking to yourself on the pages as if you were a friend. What would you tell a friend that was feeling this way? What would you write to her? So maybe you make up this beautiful, endearing name for yourself, like, even little Barry, like, what would you say to, 11-year-old self, 15-year-old self, 20-year-old, like, what endearing advice would you have for her? Oh, sweetie, I see your pain, but you are a miracle. You are magical. You are going to be okay. Like, what if you told your body, your system that's listening to all the ways in which you talk to yourself, that you are a magical human being and you're going to be okay? And that might sound like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, but try it on. Start talking to yourself the way you would talk to a friend and see how it changes the way you feel in your body.
I love that. We're going to take one more quick break, and I want to talk a little bit more about morning pages and a few other things on the other side. Hold on. We'll be right back. Okay. So, one of the things that Julia Cameron recommends, and I think I'm pretty sure she does, it's been a while since I've read the book.
Artist date?
The artist date, yes, but no, it's the thing about morning pages and why do them in the morning, right? Is that,
I know, we should talk about it.
Right.
They're ego-free.
You're also closest to your unconscious state. Like, if you just wake up and you roll over and grab your journal and just freeform write for 15 minutes.
But it's also Jungian theory that says that our ego doesn't wake until 30 to 40 minutes after we wake. So imagine writing ego-free. What a gift.
What a gift. That's right. And you're closest to your unconscious.
On the
you're closest to your true self. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And, I think that's a really important thing, because there, to mention, because, if people don't go out and buy the book and they're like, oh, I'll just write, for 30, for 15 minutes when I get home from dropping off the kids, like, that's good. That's fine. But try it the second you wake up.
I agree. Have the notebook by the bedside. It also is a place to capture dreams. And quite often, if we don't do it right away, knowing the internal story and vision that you have for yourself will quite often manifest in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
In the dreams.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love it. So, so, so good.
So ask me why
yeah.
in the morning. That would be really cool to say, why are they
Yeah.
called morning pages?
Why are they called morning pages, Barry? Yeah.
When we write in the morning, we are writing on the edge of subconscious. So before we even open our phone, before we do anything else, even patter in to get a cup of coffee, even before meditation, if you have a practice, it is the time that we are closest to our ego-free selves. Julia Cameron says that Jungian theory is what brought her to introduce them as something we do upon waking, because it is the time in which we are ego free. Imagine waking up before your ego wakes. And so you can write without judgment and freely on this edge of deep subconsciousness. And it is so freeing, and it will really tell you the truth of what is there. And so I say keep the notebook by the bedside, and truly sitting up in bed, grabbing the pen, grabbing the page, and just writing. And she says 3 longhand pages. It's better than timing. I think we said, Julia, why 3? She's like, 1's not enough. 2 is almost just right. And 3 kind of gets the job done. There's no science about why 3. But I think somewhere around page 1.5, you will find that glimmer that I was talking about. And I use this shorthand in circling something that feels like, or making an asterisk or a mark, like something you want to go back to, because rereading the pages can be really difficult. We don't want to go back and sit in, the muck, as I say. Sure. So we may want to revisit something that feels inspired or feels like an aha. And so I always say, use this little shorthand and of just marking it to come back to something that you want to revisit.
Yes.
And do it for a week. You don't have to buy the book. We're here to share the cliff notes of Morning Pages. So if you don't want to buy the book right now, or it feels too overwhelming to read something like that,
just do the practice. Just do it.
The practice. The other thing that she offers that I will also offer here, because I think it's an incredible practice, is something called the artist date. And the artist date is just making time for yourself on your calendar where you do something that's just for pure, unfettered joy. You go on a solo journey and you do something that brings you into that freedom and childlike state and into your creativity, into your zone of genius, if you will, where you just feel so on purpose and in your fun, and making that non-breakable time and date with yourself can really unveil and reveal something that is really, as I said, in your zone of genius. And maybe it's something you want to do on a larger scale. It really unfolds something that may be hiding. I believe we're all born creatives anyway, and somewhere along the way, somebody somewhere, a teacher or an ex-husband maybe, has told us that, that we are not good at something, and so we believe it. But when we start to do this practice, there's all of this uncovering of our own creative spirit and our creative genius. And I think creativity also is a great grief tending tool. Painting, crafting, all of it. So juicy.
Yep. So juicy. I love it. All right. So Barri, tell people where they can find you, and if they want to learn more about this grief process and grieving through the divorce in a way that is maybe a little bit more guided and held and led by a professional such as yourself. Where can they find you and all that you do?
Oh, so sweet. I'm at thememoryscircle.com in all the places and at the Memory Circle on Instagram. I hold writing groups, support groups. I meet with folks one-on-one. Sometimes I don't think we treat ourselves to the kind of coaching, the kind of support, the kind of guidance that we so deserve in this process. That in and of itself is a form of healing. When we just make the time and space for ourselves to be held, and also in group to meet like-minded women. I think when we are seen and heard and witnessed in the kind of non-death loss that this kind of grief shows us in divorce, when I see, it's almost like seeing a line in a book that suddenly illuminates for you that, oh, I see me, or I see that, or, it's sort of a wisdom exchange. It's not fixing one another, but it's seeing yourself in a way that you may not be able to do on your own. It's such a beautiful way of being in the work.
100%. I think, anytime women gather in community, we all come alive.
Yeah, we're lanterns. I always say, like, what I learn and I teach you, and you may be a little further ahead, and I may, someone else may be a little in my rearview mirror, but we all, walk each other through this process by sharing the truth of what is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have a free grief relief kit that is on your website. People can download that at thememoryscircle.com. Yes?
Yes. I love giving out free tools and treats and anything that you need. And on my DM, on Instagram, I am always full of writing prompts. And I am always so amazed at folks who have never written before that find a writing practice to be a beautiful tool for them through the divorce process. And I say, if you're writing, you're a writer.
Yes, agree. Barri, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure having this conversation with you. And I know that it's going to make a lot of women, it's going to give them a lot of empowered tools to help them through this process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.